Cheating wife got mad that I send photo proofs of her affair with a cop to his wife. I separated from my ex for good about 6 months ago, and we have a beautiful 2-year-old daughter. Lately, she has been letting her stay with me every weekend, but understandably this is inconvenient for her because she would like to have some weekends with her. I live alone and my only days off are the weekends, so I could not have her any other days because of work. I can't afford daycare, so I decided to apply for a voucher to help me pay for one. It is almost ready, but they just need a written parenting plan signed by both of us. She refuses to talk about a parenting plan unless we discuss it in person. This is something I will not do. She has put my safety, freedom, and life at risk before. The last time I saw her in person was December 12th when she decided to call the cops on me because I was being offensive. The only reason I did not get arrested was because I had secretly audio recorded her and had text messages that conflicted with her story. If I had gotten arrested for domestic issues, that would have crossed off many employment opportunities from the list for me. That means she would have taken away future financial support from my daughter as well. We now communicate through email because she claims to want to have every conversation documented, except this one for some reason. I told her if she really was scared about her safety around me, she should be thrilled that I do not want to meet up with her in person to come up with a parenting plan. She has now threatened to take me to court. She said she will contact the judicial court first thing tomorrow morning and file for us to go through custody and parentage court. She is doing this because she knows I cannot afford a lawyer right now, and even if she felt that I could, she knows it would be a huge blow to my savings. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update: I was cheated on almost 2 years ago, and the man she did it with was a cop. We tried working things out for half a year, but it was just too much, and it never worked out. During reconciliation, she explained how he used his position as a police officer to win her over. When I found out about the affair, I sent screenshots of their sexting to the cop's wife. They broke up, and I heard from mutual friends that he would search up my name to see if I had any warrants, and a mutual friend told him that he would not find anything on me because I never break the law. I also heard that he would brag about taking my woman. I could not live in the same city because it is a small city, and I would see him everywhere. Every time I would see him, an intense rage would just fill my entire body, and it was an immense struggle keeping myself from hurting him badly. My ex told me he was afraid of me because I used to fight professionally, so I know he would use lethal force if I ever got my hands on him. I have moved about an hour away, and I have met women who tell me the cops they encounter, give them their number, and try to use their position to score with women. I now have a strong hatred towards cops because of all this, and I know it is not right. My younger brother is going to try out for the police force, the same police department where the affair partner works at. He is very excited about testing with them, and I feel so bad because everyone is excited for him except me, and he notices. All I can think about is him working with the man that participated in breaking up my family. It bothers me that I have a hatred for cops when most are kind and respectful, and most of all I hate that I cannot be happy for my brother who is excited for this opportunity. Has anyone else gone through a similar situation? Does anyone know how to get over this unreasonable hatred that I have for law enforcement? Update: I know she doesn't regret cheating. I know she even feels like she's better off without me. I think that's what drives me to get revenge because she suffered little to no consequences and excelled in her career while I was left devastated and had to start from the bottom when I had everything with her. I had a house and a family, and now I live with a roommate. I find myself constantly daydreaming of doing so good in life that she realizes she messed up bad and comes back begging for forgiveness and to come back. I would never take her back, but I want her to feel crushed and overwhelmed with depression like I am. A good thing about my drive for revenge is that I am determined and motivated to get my life together. If she had never cheated, I would have never gone to school full-time for computer science and make the dean's list. I would still be a little cholo thug, happy and content with a stupid retail job. Every single time I feel like giving up because the curriculum is just too difficult, I start thinking about the satisfaction I'll feel if she were to ever come crawling back and I get right back in it and just crush it. So I do recognize the positive in that. The negative is that she is constantly on my mind. I have met great women and I cannot give my all to the relationship because my objective is to get a hotter woman hoping that one day she sees me with her holding hands. I should be wishing her the best because a win for her is a win for my daughter, but I just can't. People will say that I need to forgive and move on, and I'm trying so hard to do that, but I can't. I don't know how to change my feelings towards someone that left me in bad condition. Does anyone else feel like this? How did you overcome it? Should I even overcome it because this drive has made me better than I have ever been? Those closest to me have noticed that I am a changed person in a positive way. I'm not sure what to do here. Update. The first Christmas was ruined by her showing up uninvited. This is the second year I spend Christmas without the family I thought I had, without my daughter. She's in California with my daughter at Disneyland. I am happy knowing that she is having a blast out there. I can tell from our daily FaceTime calls. Me? I am here alone in a room that I rent at a friend's house staring at the gifts I got for my daughter that she cannot open until she returns from her trip next Friday. All I can do is think back when my ex would tell me that she could not contribute to any bills because she had to send money to her aunt in Mexico. I earned $10 an hour less than her, but I still was able to maintain the house I rented all on my own. I often only had $20 left over after paying everything that needed to be paid that month. She was saving up thousands of dollars for 2 years for a down payment on a house getting ready for the moment we separated. How could I be such a sucker? I hope that any lurkers on here can learn to recognize the warning signs. Stop being willfully blind. Trust your gut. This is what being naive got me. I hope the rest of you had a better Christmas than I did. Reckless wife cheated, but forgot. She was using my card. I filed and got full custody. She's broken and mad. I wish I had known these forums existed when I went through the hell of finding out my wife, now ex, was having an affair while I was on my last deployment to Afghanistan. Not that I would wish the experience on anyone, but I have found it helpful to hear from others that have had similar experiences, and to know that I'm not alone in feeling the anger and pain, even years later. So here's my contribution. Even though all of our normal bills had been put on auto payment prior to my deployment, I would occasionally log in and check balances, just to make sure everything was tracking and getting paid as it should. Money wasn't an issue, but I knew that between my wife's demanding job on a local military base and multiple kids to look after, something could fall between the cracks. On a whim, I opened up the Visa/debit card and started scrolling through the transaction history. The transactions were mostly routine, a few too many dinners out. But it's not easy being the parent managing things with a deployed spouse, so I wasn't going to say anything. Then I noticed a transaction that surprised me. An airline ticket to a tourist destination on the other side of the country. The trip was scheduled for next month, even though I had almost 6 months left on my deployment. The transaction had been processed several weeks prior. I tried to think of a good reason for my wife to book that flight and not tell me about it. It could not have been a work trip, not only because of the destination, but because government travel does not allow you to use your personal credit card. During our next Skype opportunity, after the kids were out of earshot, I casually mentioned the airline ticket and asked my wife what that was about. She hesitated and asked me how I knew about that. She never did online banking and was apparently unaware of the level of detail available online. She quickly recovered and told me that all of the stress of dealing with the kids by herself caused her to accept an invitation for a girls' mental health retreat with some of her female coworkers. I told her I understood she might be stressed, but still, it seems like traveling across the country and leaving your kids at home without another parent might be something that we would have discussed before you purchased the plane ticket. Then I asked her who would be taking care of the children for the week she was gone. She responded that a 16-year-old neighbor girl would be watching our children, all of whom were young, with the youngest still in diapers. I replied that if there was not a responsible adult in the house taking care of the children, that I would personally notify Child Protective Services. So she quickly agreed to ask her mother to drive up and watch the kids. Of course, the reason she would be so reckless as to get a child to watch our children for a week was because her mother or any other adult might ask questions about the trip. She told her mother and the children that it was a business trip. But once I discovered the trip, she could not use that excuse with me because, as a service member, and therefore a government employee myself, I would have seen right through that lie, hence the girls' retreat line. I half expected her to cancel the trip if it was not legitimate, because who in their right mind would go through with an affair once the spouse had discovered the tickets? But whether it was because she felt locked into her story and had to go through with it, or she simply wanted it so badly she was rationalizing that she would not get caught, she did get on the plane. When I was not able to reach my wife the day before the trip, I called my mother-in-law to check on the kids, and she told me my wife had left earlier in the day to spend the night in a hotel next to the airport. A little unusual since we had flown out of that airport many times on vacations and never had any problem driving the 50 miles the morning of the flight. Also, no hotel charge ever appeared for that night. I also kept waiting for any hotel charge to appear at the destination, and it never did even though she was there a week. This particular tourist destination is famous for being expensive, and yet over the course of the week I only saw 2 charges on my wife's bank card. I could tell from the transactions that she was in fact at the destination she claimed to be going to, but how she managed to eat for a week and take in the sights without spending any money was another mystery. She never tried to contact me by phone or email the entire time she was on her so-called retreat, even though I had an Afghan cell phone as well as fairly regular access to email and the internet. I asked her to send me some pictures of her and her friends, explaining that it would do me good to see her enjoying herself and recharging her batteries, so to speak. Shockingly, she had not a single picture of a week in a tourist mecca. While she was at her destination, I was in a location with internet access and started reviewing phone logs. I found one number that she was sending and receiving calls to many times per day, including the middle of the night. The phone calls would often last over an hour, and these phone calls started not when I was in Afghanistan, but when I was in another state for a couple of months doing training for the deployment. I was essentially on the deployment because there was only a weekend back at home between the training and the deployment. I figured I had given her enough rope, so I started pressing her for the names of her friends that went on the trip with her. When she told me that all of the friends except one had backed out right before the trip, I knew she was panicking. She was trying to simplify her story. She gave me one name but would not give me the last name or the department that this woman supposedly worked in. I then said we will come back to the name of the woman that supposedly went on the trip with her, but we really needed to discuss these phone records. I gave her the name the phone number was associated with. Turns out that was her affair partner's father. Then I pointed out the fact that going back to the time I began my pre-deployment training up until the present, she was calling this guy 10 to 20 times a day. The only exception was there were no calls to or from that number after she left for the supposed hotel the night before her trip, and there were no calls to or from that number the entire time she was on her retreat. Furthermore, the calls only started back during the time she would have been driving home from the airport after her return trip. I told her that I found it odd someone who she could not resist talking to a minimum of 10 times a day for a year simply dropped off her phone log the night before her flight when she was supposedly in a hotel near the airport, and then resumed like clockwork about an hour and a half after her return flight landed. I had to end that call abruptly, but by the next time we spoke, I had confirmed through a friend at that command that there was no woman with that name at her command. I informed her I had proof that the woman she claimed to have gone to the destination with was fictitious, and that we had already established the man with the mystery phone in his pocket was on that trip with her. She eventually admitted that it was a male coworker, but still claimed everyone else backed out on her, and so it was just by chance that this guy that she was calling multiple times a day for a year ended up being the one on the plane with her. However, once again, she could not provide a single name of a person who would substantiate the story that they had originally been planning to go on the trip. Ultimately, she admitted there was never anyone else except this guy that was going with her. The inability to produce a hotel receipt or show any transaction for a hotel on her bank card forced her to admit that she shared a room with him, but she claimed it was a suite, just 2 friends sharing expenses. I pointed out that according to the phone records, it would suggest that this same guy spared you a hotel expense the night before the flight as well. I told her she was a liar and a cheat and that I wanted a divorce. She then started wailing like someone that just received bad news on Judgment Day. She then got the kids involved, forcing them to hold the camera so that I could see her, or sprawled out on the kitchen floor bawling and begging me not to leave her. I didn't continue the call because I did not want to discuss it in front of the children. For the remainder of the deployment, I would periodically grill her just to watch her squirm and tell more lies that I could catch her in. When I finally returned from deployment and took a cab to the house to pick up some clothes and uniforms, she tried to come on to me because she knew if she convinced me to sleep with her, it would reset the clock on the 12-month divorce waiting period in our state, which had been running since I emailed her that we were separated pending a divorce 6 months ago. I told her that I may have been in Afghanistan for a year, but I still wasn't that desperate. After another week of begging and pleading, she asked me if there was anything she could do to make me consider not divorcing her. She offered a one-sided open marriage so that I could get my revenge. She offered to stay in a sexless marriage since I told her I would never touch her again. I replied that it was a long shot, but if she was completely honest and answered every question, no matter how graphic, then maybe I would consider it. She started telling me about when they met and the first time they hooked up, but it didn't take long before I was spotting inconsistencies and demonstrable lies in her story. She was clearly lying to minimize her guilt. I didn't point this out at the moment because I wanted to let her spin the whole thing out before I started picking it apart. When I left for the hotel that evening, I asked her if she had stopped all contact with the affair partner, and she said she could if I really wanted her to. I told her that a sane person would not have made that comment, but yes, I really wanted her to, and she agreed. 4 days later, when she thought I was halfway to New York with the kids, I noticed on the locator app that we have on the phones that she was at a restaurant in a nearby city. Since she thought I was out of town, I waited until the tracker showed her back at home, waited a few minutes, and walked in on her and an affair partner in our bedroom. There was only her car in our driveway, so either they drove her car from a restaurant that was over an hour away, or they parked her in a hidden location so that the neighbors would not see. The AP bolted, but my son said, "Isn't that Tom?" Not his real name. And only then did I confirm the guy running down the street was the affair partner. That is also when I realized that not only did my kids know him, they were on a first-name basis. My wife tried to say that he had just come down the hour and a half from where he lives to check out the new bathroom light fixture. She was getting clearly agitated and finally snuck past me, jumped in her car, and left for about 20 minutes. My guess is she picked up an affair partner down the street and transported him about a mile away to a shopping center where his car was probably hidden. I could go on for days with the individual lies that she told over the coming days and months. But we learned through the guardian ad litem in the custody fight that the affair partner had practically been living at our house. The AP had picked up the kids from school and daycare. AP, my then wife, and the kids went on outings as a family. Sometimes this guy even took my kids out without my wife. My son even walked in on him in the shower in his mother's bedroom once. After I got full custody, the kids moved with me to another city. I try to be civil and co-parent, but it's not always easy. My ex-wife tried to convince her friends and family that I had been the one cheating. Absolutely not true ever. Ever since the divorce, she has begged me to take her back. I either don't respond or change the subject. But whenever she makes that suggestion, it feels like D-Day all over again. I try my best to forgive her because I think she has deep-seated mental issues that contribute to this behavior. I say that because before I met her, she was engaged to a guy that was about to start medical school, and he broke it off after catching her cheating. I can forgive the people that tried to destroy me on a regular basis, but I cannot and will not ever forgive her for what she put my children through. Believe it or not, I've only hit the high points, but I hope reading this and knowing there is light at the end of the tunnel might help someone going through the same experience at the moment.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.